Hey everybody, welcome back to the Build Show Network. I'm Steve Basic Architect, and we're in for a little treat today because we're in North Carolina. We're not up in New England anymore. Even though when you look behind me, it looks like we brought New England with us, right? So these clients came to me and they own the property, but they were looking for that New England house, high performance, well-built house. So here we are. You can see we're well under construction. We're drywalling on the inside, actually. But I wanted to step outside here because I wanted to point out a couple things that are my favorite on the house. As an architect, it's never an accident that things look good, right? It's a lot of work looking at what's the right size window, proportions, hierarchy, sense of order. All these things have to kind of get filtered through to provide you with an elevation. And so a couple things I wanted to point out. Obviously, we have the main body of the house. In this case here, I broke it down into three pieces. We have a center piece, we have two flanking wings. Understand that right through the center, the right side and left side are symmetrical based on that center line. Now, I took the front section, the middle section here, I pulled it out 2 feet, and I pushed it up a foot. So that gives a sense of hierarchy. It also has the largest glazing ratio of the three smaller pieces here, meaning it has the most windows, it has the front door, but it also has that negative space of the porch here that actually amplifies the hierarchy of this center section. So on the left side and right side here, we have a same sense of symmetry in that if we drew a line down through the middle of the sets of double hungs, we'd understand that the right side, left side of each of the wings is purely symmetrical. But one of the things that I did was, instead of putting full-size windows on the side, I dropped down to these smaller windows. It gives it a little bit of that New England flair, but the other thing it does is it minimizes the amount of glazing on that elevation so that it doesn't compete with this center section, right? So when you're driving up here, you get to see the whole house, but the mind resolves it as, hey, there's the front door, this is the center section, here's these two wings that kind of play a supporting role. Notice that the roof was pushed up a foot and actually goes back and climbs onto those wings. Well, none of this was by chance or by accident. It was purely intentional. The other thing to notice is that rather than just having that roof line as we come up the hill, I put these small dormers up there so that we have something that extends above the roof line there, but knits the three pieces back together. So we have exactly the same dormer. It's just that this one is more forward and a little higher than its two counterparts on the side there. So anyways, let's go back to the studio. We'll pull out a nice drawing of this front elevation. We'll dive into it a little bit deeper. We'll see you there.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the studio. Hopefully you loved that trip down there. I had a blast going down to North Carolina. For an architect, I don't think it gets much better than to walk around and see your thoughts come to life. It's actually a real special part of what we do as architects, and it's kind of, I don't know, personally fulfilling. So yeah, always a treat to go down there and see it. So we're back in the studio here. We're going to talk about that front elevation a little bit more in detail. And guess who we got? We got Big Red here. He's going to join us because he's always a big help in laying out those explanations. So let's dive into it. Let's take a look at this elevation.
All righty. So Big Red, what do we got here? So this is a building elevation of the project we just saw out there down in North Carolina. It's pretty typical New England colonial, but a few little twists and a couple things that I wanted to talk about. So there's a few concepts here that I'd like to talk about in general. So let's talk about order, hierarchy. Spelled something like that. Scale, proportion, contrast, symmetry,
And with contrast, we'll talk about positive, negative. So let's talk about it. As far as order goes, we have the main body here with, some section on this side here that looks like it could potentially have been part of the original house, potentially an addition that came later, but we have the main body of the house, and then we have kind of the supporting cast here. So there's a sense of order in that. If we look at the elevation proper, meaning the main elevation, there's a real sense of order there, that there's basically three pieces. There's the front piece, the left wing, and the right wing. Notice that they're all pretty much the same size, right? So these are all roughly the same dimension. But while there's order, there is a sense of hierarchy there, meaning that this second or the middle piece here is a little higher, and it comes out a little bit on the sidewall. So it steps forward. And not only does the main body step forward, but it has this negative space of the porch, which really reaches out and becomes kind of that welcoming handshake to the house. So we have these three pieces. We have the middle one being the most important, or being the one that establishes the hierarchy as saying, hey, I'm the most important piece in this piece, and this being the most important piece in the whole, right? If you notice, you can draw a line right down through the middle here, and this half is exactly a mirror image of that half. And that's intentional. That gives us that symmetry. Symmetry is a pretty much an easy or default way to get a really good sense of order, right? When this looks like that, and it's bilaterally symmetrical on both sides of that line, there's a really strong sense of order. You look at it, it makes sense. You really only have to understand one side, because if I understand this, I understand that. And if I understand the relationship of this to that, then I understand the relationship of this to that. So it gives me less to think about. Even though I'm thinking about three pieces, I really only have to compare two, right? As far as proportion goes, we talked about that. These are pretty much equal, except that this is a little bit higher. It allows that roof to go up higher. And because this comes out forward, it appears to be a little bit bigger, right? As far as scale goes, we have that front porch. We have a lot of these windows that establish that nice, comfortable scale, the negative space of the porch. And the negative space does a little bit more than the scale. It's actually kind of a play on that hierarchy and sense of order, in that we have the negative space here under the porch. But remember, we had these bump out bays on both sides, and those came out at you. So they're somewhat of a contrast to the negative space that we get this positive space to come out. So it's kind of a way that suggests these two wings are starting to compete with the middle, but they're not overwhelming the middle, right? We always want to establish that hierarchy. So something is number one. Something is the best part of it. And that is clearly that section, right? So again, those sides are symmetrical. Now, if I look at each of these three pieces, we'll also notice that if I go down this line, the right and the left side of the middle piece is also symmetrical, right? So that again enhances that sense of order, that not only is there order in the overall scheme of things, but there is a sense of order in this one small section. And it's not a mistake that if I draw this line up, the door aligns with that window, this window aligns with the dormer, these two windows align, and those windows align. Again, giving that strong sense of order. Now, if I go to the sides, you'll also notice that we have the dormer here, and we have the dormer there, and those dormers on the roof are to speak to the one here. So they're the same size dormer, but remember, because this one's a little higher, it sets kind of that hierarchy. Again, for that dormer's a little bit more important than the two flankers, but the two flankers are there because
these two sections want to pay respect or, homage to that middle piece, if you will, right? To again, retain that sense of order while retaining that sense of hierarchy. But in doing that, we have this second line of symmetry there and here, so that everything that's happening on this side of the line is happening on that side of the line in that one section. So 3 sections, they're symmetrical overall, but then in each of the 3 sections, we have a strong sense of symmetry, right? So that symmetry helps us, again, understand that order. And you probably heard me say it before, if you saw some of the previous videos. In our mind, when we look at things, the things that are very easily resolved and make sense very quick are things that we come to love and understand and appreciate very quick. So having that quick resolution, to me, translates to kind of that quick love or appreciation for what we did here. So when you look at something and it makes sense, you can sit back and say, hey, that totally makes sense. Man, that looks good. I really like what you did there. So the other important aspect of these 2 wings that you notice is not only are they symmetrical, but we have that positive space, which is this boxed out bay, which comes out. And then we have these windows up above that stay in that same plane, just like those do. And like I said, we have the dormers, but look at these little guys. So we have these little flankers. And, if you look in the floor plan, these are different rooms. Sometimes they might be a bathroom or a hallway or the like, or sometimes this window and that window are all in the same office. But as in that sense of hierarchy, we have this big piece in the middle with all the big windows, and these actually have a transom and then those windows in the dormer. But we put these little ones in, so they help fill in that field of the windows, but they allow each of the 2 flanking sides to have a sense of their own hierarchy, right? So that the stuff in the middle is the most important, and then these windows down the sides are a supporting cast. Well, notice that these windows here are slightly larger in proportion to the windows in the dormer, but they're somewhat the same style, right? So when you look at it, these 5 windows add a really good sense of proportion, and that these 5 windows are the supporting cast to that sense of order on each of the flanks. So to recap, right, we have those small windows. They help out this. They fill in that field, but they don't overwhelm it. Meaning, if I took one of these windows and pasted it there, and there, we'd have a whole lot of windows in that wall, and it would feel like this is going to start competing with the middle. And we don't want that. We want this to be more of a submissive role to the piece that comes out in the middle. So that, again, when you drive up, there's no mistaking. This is the front of the house, the most important piece. This is the supporting cast. So those windows are kind of one of those many steps in that supporting cast, right? We talked about the scale. We talked about the proportion of those windows. Also notice that, down here on the first floor, these windows are a little bit taller than the windows up above, right? Give it that heavier base. And again, here, notice here, not only are the windows bigger, but we added the transoms. And those transoms make that box, this heavily transparent piece that helps carry some of the weight of making that this very positive element to the elevation. The last thing that I want to talk about, which is one of my favorite pieces of the elevation that doesn't really deal with those, is when the roof comes down, notice just as it gets to the end, I did a pitch break. And so this is an 8 up there, and this is a 4 down there. And it's just an elegant way to bring that roof and kind of give it the end that it needs. It might not be the best analogy, but to me, it's almost like, that parachuter that's falling towards the ground. And then just before they get to the ground, they pull the cords, the chute fills up with air, and it goes, their speed immediately drops. And then it has that kind of nice, cushy last bit to the fall. And it gives that nice end there. So I also, in addition to the elevation here, I whipped up this detail and out of the drawing set and brought that. Set that up. Sorry about that. But just wanted to give you a quick understanding of how we did that. So we have our 2x10 rafter, and that 2x10 rafter gets seated on the plate just like that. Remember, we talked about, the bird's mouth or part of the rafter there in one of the earlier roof framing videos, and how that sits down, and we have our little hold down, and then we have some blocking here that keeps them from rolling. Well, to get that pitch break, and you can see there's the 8 and 12, that pitch break is right there. And so what we did was we basically took a 2x6 and ran it back and nailed it off. And then we had the 2x6 outrigger that makes up our soffit. So we end up with that. So there's that coming down as the 8. Then the parachute fills with air. We get down to that 4 and get that nice gentle slope to the end. And there's our box soffit. And that's how we put that roof together. So it's kind of a nice ending. It's a nice kind of soft bend in the brim of the hat. That is that front elevation. And I think it ties it all really, really nicely together. So anyways, those are the details for the front elevation.
All right. So there you have it. I think we took this elevation apart and put it back together a couple times there. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. It's always fun when we get to play architect and talk about the things that we do behind the scenes that people end up appreciating, but some may never have any understanding of how we got there. Just, yeah, that looks pretty. But there's actually some rules to get there. But anyways, if you haven't checked out my earlier videos, I suggest you go back, look at them. We got some really interesting stuff there. I got some really good stuff coming out online here in the near future. So stay tuned for that. Go back, check out those other ones. Also check out my colleagues, Matt, Jake, Wade, and Brent. They're all doing a hell of a job, doing some really, really cool stuff. Get to see some really cool things. And more importantly, they're all guys that really think about what they're doing. So you get some insider, kind of thinking there. It's just not surface stuff. So go check them out. Couple other small tidbits, follow me on Instagram. You can find me there at Stephen Basic Architect. Post a lot of information very similar to this on a daily basis. And lastly, I'm one of 3 on an Unbuild It podcast. So the title is Unbuild It. You can find us. We drop episodes every 2 weeks. And basically, my colleagues and friends, Jake and Peter, well, we have some chatter. We mix it up a little with some jokes, with some good building science, some really good understanding from 3 totally different perspectives. And we lay it out there and try and give you some more information. So check that out. But hey, until the next time, this is live from the Build Show, right? Until next time, long live our buildings.